This is a picture that I took as February the 3rd, 2020, which I think was yesterday. And the cool thing was this is behind my house in a little lot. And that object back there, that's the same thing. So, cheating winter grass. That's not what we're going to talk about today, but I do want to bring up the point I've always called March National Thin Cow Month because of cattle chasing cheat in winter grass. But it was just funny as I was sitting in there working on this presentation, I kept looking at the grass out there, and I swear in 3 days I saw it grow from about 6 inches to what's close to 12. So yesterday I was going down to the farm. Our red bud trees had started to bloom, and so did cottonwood trees. I was just talking to Don and those guys. They're going to get smoked tonight and tomorrow. For those of you who do not know who I am, I know most of you guys, my name's Lokey. I'm with Apache Co-op. I've been with the co-op for about 1.5 years now. I've been in the retail ag business in the Chickasha area now for over 20 years. Do want to say before I get started that for me, my job, one thing that makes it easy is a lot of the people I work with are informed, knowledgeable people, both inside the industry and then the producers as well. That speaks to a group like this as well as an organization like this. There's a lot of producers I've dealt with in a lot of areas, and I just want to say that this group here, y'all take advantage of opportunities such as organizations like this, and this is a good group of people. So it just makes my job much easier in dealing with any facet of agriculture whenever you're dealing with people that know what's going on. So what are we going to talk about today? The first two are relevant today, be it grass technique and frothy bloat or wheat pasture bloat. And those are areas that I had to deal with issues for years and years. The third one, we're going to talk about flies. And of these 3 areas, that's the one that I had the least knowledge of, and it's the one that for about since I was asked or informed that I was going to be speaking, that is the one area where I had to do a lot of research. I've got a presentation here on it. It's not totally exactly what I wanted this to be because the information that you have to just pull off the internet to find it is a little bit limited. So for instance, compared to a wheat pasture bloat test that Oklahoma State will conduct, it's easy to perform a test like that, and so we can get results back easy to help us make better, more informed decisions as producers. Something like flies, it's so random, and then you have so many species of flies. There have been some tests on flies, and when I say what I was looking for was specifically the impact that it has on cattle. And so from a cost standpoint, if we could determine what negative impact or what it pulls from us as producers pertaining to cattle would help us be able to make better decisions on how much money we can spend to help try and prevent and in what areas we can spend. So because I just was not able to find all the research, I do have some studies so we can kind of start to paint a picture. I think we'll be able to understand what flies we're looking at, their behaviors, where they lay the eggs, and just knowing that, that'll help us in at least be able to treat them better. But again, maybe in a year we can come back and revisit it as we have more experience. The reason it's important for me, I think, is coming from the feed industry. You know, there was a feed-through product that I would be asked about, being an IGR or a Clarifly or a Raybon type product that you feed through. And I would often be asked, well, is it effective? And I would say You know, we went to a training on this, and the people that manufacture it tell us that, yes, it's effective, so I think it's effective. But I'm just kind of basing it on what I'm being told by manufacturers, so. Some people love it, some people don't, and so forth, so trying to kind of get through the weeds on some of this stuff. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. Grass tetany, and the reason I want to talk about grass tetany is it would occur now, more than likely. So what is grass tetany? It's basically unfortunately, BRUS, we don't get to see clinical signs on grass tetany a whole lot because BRUS is a very good veterinarian. Sometimes it skips clinical signs, and when we find out we have an issue with grass tetany, we go out there and the animal's already dead. And BRUS has done a lot of pretty miraculous stuff with animals, but he has yet to fix that. I don't think he can fix dead. So, he can do some good stuff, but I haven't seen him fix that yet. But basically what it is it's a magnesium deficiency in the animal. The areas, or what type of environment, what might we suspect it would occur? Here, we're going to think about wheat pasture or any small grain pastures that we are grazing. And the potential for grass tetany would be increased on grasses that respond to nitrogen and those that which we are fertilizing. So we associate nitrogen fertilization with protein. Protein has a direct effect on the potassium level that's both in the soil and in the plant. The proteins actually release more potassium into the plant, and also potassium itself hinders the release from the soil of magnesium into the plant, therefore creating a shortage. Cold weather also does not allow magnesium to enter into the plant. So we have animals out grazing a high protein, high energy, high water forage that is relatively high in potassium and low in magnesium. So what animals are most likely we're going to suspect that could contract grass tetany would be older lactating cows. It can happen in growing calves and younger cows, but it's not very common. Older cows are the most susceptible for a couple reasons. Where's Dr. Welshons? I thought he was going to be here. Because really getting into the weeds on what effects magnesium has over the entire body. So magnesium itself is a key component of the central nervous system. Okay? Magnesium works with calcium and has an interaction of all muscle activity and some neurological activity as well. So if we were fortunate enough to see clinical signs, what we would see would be muscle twitching, nervousness. Their ears might be erect. They might be agitated. I've seen some videos where some dairy cows that actually, you think maybe they have rabies. They're very aggressive, but it's a very quick occurring illness. And the reason why, that old cows are more susceptible, and I don't know if there's a magic age, but the older that cow gets, she loses the ability for her system to mobilize or extract from her reserves magnesium that's stored primarily in her bone. So if she loses that ability, and then you couple that with the fact that she is lactating, this is probably the most important part. Regardless of how much magnesium she's taking in, if she has a calf on her side, she is outputting or releasing the same amount of magnesium through the milk, regardless of how much she takes in. So if she's taking in 12 grams, the calf is removing 4, she's good. If she's taking in 0, the calf's still taking out 4. Regardless if she's getting 0 or 12, she's still outputting 4. And that's why it happens so quick. There's a few ways that we can prevent it. The most obvious is we don't graze her. So I know that's kind of difficult as we've gone through the winter. We've had hay, been feeding hay, we've been feeding cubes. She's got a calf on her side, she's pulled down, and you got that weed, and stalker calves are too high, or you can't pencil them in to make it work, whatever. I've got weed, it's only worth $4, I'm not gonna harvest it. Let's kick them out. That would probably be 6 years old if there was an age. Like I said, as the animal gets older, it loses more its ability to extract from its reserves of magnesium that's needed. So sometimes you're just forced to have to graze those cows. Good buddy of mine down around the Tipton area, he used to buy a bunch of cows. They would buy them Selborns, buy them cheap, they're thin, they would breed them, calve them out, run them on wheat pasture. And he found out that he'd run into grass technique quite a bit. So he found out if they incorporated some legumes into the pasture, which alfalfa, for instance, will contain twice as much magnesium as wheat will in forage or hay. Incorporating that in there, that caused some other issues, but it did almost wipe out the grass technique. So as far as on the supplementing side, you know, if you're kicking her out there anyway, you're more than likely not going to feed her. There are several feeds that you could feed her that would actually raise the level of magnesium. But if she's out there on wheat, you're probably not going to feed her. So the most common thing you're going to do is feed a mineral supplement. And what should that mineral supplement look like, and why do you feed her a mineral supplement in that setting? It would be, you don't need to provide her any phosphorus to speak of, because wheat's sufficient. She does need salt, she does need calcium, and more importantly, she needs to get somewhere between 8 to 10 grams or so of magnesium per head per day. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I know a lot of people, so if somebody's going through the winter and you've got your winter cow mineral, it's typically going to be higher in phosphorus. And so whenever I kick them out, well, they're on this mineral, I'm going to put it out for them. It might not be the right thing. You don't need to supplement any phosphorus on wheat pasture, really. And then a winter wheat pasture mineral that you're going to be feeding hay or supplementing with feed or cake anyway is going to be lower in magnesium than what they need. So to do the math on that, you're talking about on a 4-ounce intake mineral, which is what most minerals are formulated for, that's about 113 grams. So what you should see on that tag would be around somewhere between 8 and 12%, because 10% of 113 grams would be about 100. And so that's got her about where she is. Most manufacturers of mineral, they're going to target, it's going to be called a high mag mineral or something like that, but that's the easiest way to prevent it. And again, it's not foolproof because you don't always know if every cow is eating the mineral. So, any questions on grass tank?
So for calves then, stock wheat pasture calves, is that as important then? You said it's not as much of a concern.
No, it's not as important, and that has more to do with, so that calf, for one thing, he can mobilize from his reserves. So before he's gone on wheat pasture, he's been started on feed or hay or grass. So he has built up some magnesium in his body.
So in your opinion, are you just wasting money if you're feeding high mag minerals, or is it still a good practice?
Are you talking about on calves?
Yes.
I would not feed a high mag mineral
Okay.
to calves. There's a lot of other minerals that they're likely more deficient on that could affect their gain. So I mean, that's kind of the key deal with the calf, is you want him to grow as efficiently as possible. Magnesium itself is also bitter, so I just question we may not get intake on it.
Okay.
So, but that's a good question. Anything else?
What time of year then would you start? Like if you knew you were going to put them out, ideally you'd start them on high mag before.
Yes, that is a good question, and because that the older cow that's not able to mobilize from her reserves is who we're most likely going to target there. This is just my opinion, but I don't feel like there is an advantage to building up excess in that case, because if she can't mobilize it, having some stored doesn't make that much of a difference. But for the simple fact of getting those animals accustomed to that type of mineral, I would probably start feeding it a couple weeks before. Again, on that animal, it's on the calf, yes, because they can mobilize from reserves and so forth. On an older cow, you just better have it out there while you're grazing them at least. But I would start it a little bit before, just so they can be acclimated. That's just my opinion. But there's a lot of opinions on this subject. So, anything else? All right, let's talk about bloat. So, anybody that's run stocker calves on wheat pasture, we've had to deal with this. As a matter of fact, there's probably calves bloating today, right now. They're out grazing. There's a lot of factors that play into it. So, but when we talk about wheat pasture bloat, we're specifically talking about frothy bloat. It's kind of funny. Jared Shepard and I were at a customer's place several years ago, and we were checking some pen cattle, some bulls, as a matter of fact, and we're out there, and we found a bloat, and the customer wasn't around, but we saw a chute there. I don't know if I should tell the story. I'm not going to tell who, but we run him up, and Jared grabs a garden hose and commenced to shove it down his throat, and we let him down. Fortunately, that was just a free gas bloat, and so we let him down. But that led to some other questions, and we started talking to the customer and trying to figure out what and why. We had our theories on why it bloated, and he had his. At the end of the day, I have no idea why. But I don't think I think it was just differences of management. But anyway, when we're talking about wheat pasture bloat, though, that is a frothy bloat. What happens there is basically we have because of the proteins and the interaction from the proteins and tannins and a lot of other crap that I'm not smart enough to understand, there's actually a foam that's created in the rumen of the animal. And so whenever this calf is eating a high forage, high energy diet that's highly digestible and fermentable, it's fermenting very quick. And so when you have this reaction of the proteins and the bugs, or the rumen microbes, there starts to create a slimy, frothy foam. It's hard to say, frothy foam. And so what happens is it prevents the animal's ability to eructate or belch off the gas particles. The foam actually kind of encapsulates the gas bubbles. So that's my best way of describing what it is. I had this presentation, I had about 12 slides because I was going to reference back to Oklahoma State, and then because of time, when I did my little mock-up talk through yesterday, this presentation, not to scare you guys, it took me 2 hours and 42 minutes. So I cut all that out. I got everybody. And so I've just got 2 slides on this. So anyway, just very well, we'll just address it and move on because I want to talk about the fly. So anyway, that's what it is. So where we're gonna see it here is gonna be on small grain pastures again. Of course, the wheat pasture is highly digestible. It's rich in nutrients. So who is susceptible to wheat pasture bloat? And that's basically any cattle. I mean, we've seen people have run bulls on wheat pasture, they're going to bloat. Anything can bloat. But there are a few times where we are most likely concerned about it. And one, we see it in mornings a lot because of, for 2 reasons. One, they're hungry, so they're going to be out feeding more aggressively at that time of the day. A dew will actually increase intake, and the wetter that the forage is, the more available or the faster that the fermentation process actually happens or occurs. So there's a lot of gas produced very quick inside the rumen. Another factor, which is a big one, is we often see bloat after a big change in weather, especially after a frost. So this is going to take place now as the grass is short, it's actively growing, it's very high in protein, and when you have a freeze or a frost, it does physical damage to the plant that actually it speeds up the fermentation process even faster. So the methane and the carbon dioxide is actually produced very quick. And there's a few things we can do to help prevent it. One, we didn't have this luxury this year, but it's just another kind of rule of thumb if the weed's up about 6 inches tall. So the further along wheat pasture goes, the less potent it is. So that's why we pay special concern initially with the rapid growing grass. It's very high in protein. It's just very rich. Of course, we know before we kick those animals out, we want to have them full of just hay, feed, whatever, just because of that initial, when they're coming off dormant forage, especially in feeding hay, man, when there's green grass, that's what that cattle was made, that's what that calf was made to eat, and that's what he prefers, so he's going to get aggressive. So if we can get them full, that's great. You can supplement them with a digestible fiber source. You could even feed some corn in that situation, so that's going to be dictated by feed prices in comparison to corn. Again, it's hard a lot of times to get people to supplement a calf on wheat. You're not more than likely going to go feed them every day. There would be some options. LNC did some stuff this winter with some beet pulp. Self-feeders, so the animals would limit themselves on it. Beet pulp's a highly digestible fiber source, so it's converted as energy.
And unavailable. Thanks.
Yes. Soy hulls. So soy hulls would work in its place. So similar, but yeah. I'm going to put my salesman hat on just for a second now, and we're going to talk about an IL-4. Meaning Rumensin or Bovatec. And this is, to me, because those of you that have dealt with me and dealt with cattle and wheat pasture, I'm always trying to convince people to feed Rumensin. And when I say Rumensin, I'm also talking, that's just what I say, I'm also talking about Bovatec, and which is the silicate. But Oklahoma State's done studies to show that Rumensin is more effective than Bovatec at preventing bloat. And so Oklahoma State's done several studies just to test for that. But here's a couple reasons why. So Rumensin and Bovatec, what they are is they're basically rumen modifiers, for lack of better terms. So what they do is they increase the population of the rumen microbes that are able to break down and digest fiber, like cellulose. So propionate would be an example of a bug that's breaking down the cellulose, allowing the cow or the calf to absorb it. It's what makes a ruminant a ruminant. Rumensin also decreases the bugs that are more conducive to producing the methane and in those types of gases. So just by feeding an IL-4, the amount of gas produced is less. So just by the nature of its mode of action, less gas is actually produced. If you're past that point in the animal and you're to where the froth, which is brought on by the proteins and interaction with the tannins and so forth from the bugs, Rumensin won't do much for the foam. It probably won't do anything. And that's where you have to bring in paloxolene, which is like a bloat guard. The disadvantage to feeding a bloat guard type product is it offers no other benefit other than it cuts the foam. It actually removes the foam, which would allow the gas particles, the animal to belch or rotate it off. With Rumensin, if you put it out on day one with the cattle on wheat pasture, other than the advantage of manipulating the bugs, you are decreasing their overall intake. So Rumensin will have effect on how much forage that they eat, and they become more efficient. So the animal still may gain more weight, but he's consuming less forage. So that's a secondary advantage. A third advantage would be per times that he is eating, he actually eats less per feeding. So he may eat more times throughout the day, but you run less of a risk of him loading up, eating so much more at one time that creates more foam, more gas, and so forth. So I'm always 100% of the time going to recommend, if you're on wheat pasture, feed a Rumensin product. Rumensin at 150 milligrams per head per day costs about 3 cents per head per day. With the additional gain, the bloat benefits and everything like that, your return can be as much as 10 cents. Well, Dr. Welshantz was in here talking about fed at 150 gram level, you can see increased gains of somewhere between 1/10 and 2/10 of a pound. So just say if you're getting an additional 1/10 of a pound of gain and it's just costing you 3 cents, you're basically, the cost of gain, additional cost of gain, is basically nothing. It's a third. So a third of what you're putting into it, you're getting a pound. So feed Rumensin, feed Bobatech. If you don't like Rumensin, feed Bobatech.
Okay, that would help you on bloat though.
According to Oklahoma State, it probably does not. But there are some other university studies that say otherwise. Rumensin's definitely more effective. That I think is being confirmed.
On your Bloxlane, don't they have to consume that every day to be effective?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no residual effect from Paloxone. So the times that I would put out Paloxone, I would put out Paloxone yesterday, knowing that the bad weather's coming in, just because the animals they're likely gonna be aggressive, getting ready for this cold front. Again, immediately following a freeze or a frost, then, yeah. Because once the froth is there, Rumensin won't do anything for it. That's what you've got.
Also on the Paloxone, usually that's why they come in a block, because they're more palatable. They're
Yeah.
made out of a molasses block, so you
Right.
can get cattle to go eat them versus a mineral.
Yeah, you've got to encourage them to eat it, because the cattle don't like Rumensin either. The reason we like 150 milligram per head level is if you're supplying that in a feed or a mineral, the concentration, which feed yard cattle, y'all would feed up to 400 milligrams per head per day. The thing is, that's being supplied in 40 pounds of feed. So if you're using like a mineral supplement, the Rumensin concentration or as a percentage of the product is greater. So we know Rumensin can be unpalatable, but at 150 milligram per head per day level, they don't notice it. You start to get up 1,600 grams per ton and so forth like that, it probably might start affecting palatability, but of course you're at a higher concentration, so if the animals did eat less, they're still likely going to get close to 150 milligrams. But yeah, that's it on that. Is there any other questions on that?
I've had one pasture where I've had a lot of trouble, especially in January, but it's only on one pasture. And I was trying to figure out the only difference between that pasture and the other one. We spread quite a bit of manure in that pasture last summer. And I finally had to, I was just taking them off most of the day, putting them on silage and let them out about 3 hours a day on the weed.
Right.
They'll still bloat. And we're feeding them Rumensin with the silage.
Yeah, I mean, there's listen, all we can do is reduce the risk. I mean, if I had a topic for this whole presentation today, it would be simply reducing the risk. So,
You put roadblocks out there?
Nope.
yeah,
I mean, if you have to put, they call for 1 to every 5 head.
yeah. I think in Bloxley, they're supposed to consume 1 to 2 grams per head.
And they're like, what, $16 a block?
Not more than that. I think I did look at the cost of the cost per head per day is more than remits, and I think it was, can't remember it, I wish I had it on a slide. I think it was close to 5 cents if they ate the amount they're supposed to. So, again, 5 cents really isn't that much if it's gonna prevent it. Are they voting to, are you having to choke on them, or how are you letting them down?
No, I say, we're just putting them out there 3 hours and taking them back off. And even at that, there'll still be a few of them that'll be puffed up.
Right. Of course, are you feeding them right before you kick them out?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Feed them in the morning, kick them out about noon, till 3 or so, and get them back up.
Of course, yeah, I mean, feeding them before you kick them out, if you're limit grazing them like that, when you turn them out, they're aggressive. It's just hard to kind of control that situation there, but, yeah, I don't have that answer. I don't think anybody does.
No.
My granddad used to say he put soap in their drinking water.
Which was another thing I did not bring up, so soap or fat, those, they will actually work as a, they don't really decrease the foam either, but it does create, it creates less friction, I guess, for the gas bubbles to be able to slide past the foam and so forth, and so the animal can rotate it off. I've heard of people doing that. Fat kind of has the same effect. But I got a bloating, man. I mean, it's candy bar at the door. People start panicking, and that's when the book guard sales and all that start to happen. People put soap. We had a guy that was putting, he was buying Remington blocks, and he was putting them in his stock tank. So when they were drinking the water, it by 6 or 8 of them with them in his stock tank. Did it help? Oh, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So again, unfortunately, we're gonna grade these calves on week. We're not gonna ever be able to fix it, but just by the mode of action, and on force definitely, Remington especially, it's gonna help. So, anything else before we get to flies? I know everybody's sitting here now that I mentioned flies, everybody's anxiously anticipating, what's this gonna be? All right, so anyway, again, this is not what I really wanted it to be, but like I said, it's very difficult to. I just had to research this stuff basically on the internet. So a lot of my information actually come from Wikipedia, and so we know that everything is true and correct. So, and the reason that I kind of felt this was important is because this is a topic that I'm asked about a lot, and I have the least amount of knowledge of. Man, it's a tough deal, but there is definitely some sort of an economic threshold, and I just hope that this kind of begins to allow us to understand a little bit about what we can spend as producers, and will that be returned back to us. So these are the 4 flies we're going to talk about, and this should only take me about 15 minutes before everybody starts panicking, think we're going to be here for an hour. But I think it will help us as producers be able to, if we can identify the pest and understand a little bit more about what they eat, where they lay their eggs and so forth, that might help us be a little more efficient at treating or preventing. So the 4 flies we're going to look at: the common house fly, the stable fly, the phase fly, and the horn fly. And so the house and the stable fly are more classified as confined cattle or premise type flies because of what they feed on, where they lay their eggs. You'll see the major differences in these, other than their obvious size, is look at the mouth area of the house fly and the phase fly. They are similar. The stable fly and the horn fly both have something sticking off the front here that we'll talk about in just a minute. So the first one we're going to look at is the house fly, and I'll skip through a lot of this stuff, but I will point out the important stuff that I think will help us to understand the creature a little bit better. I thought I shut that off. So the house fly is he is not considered to be of any economic, as far as pertaining to cattle, very little economic impact at all. I think as producers, when we try to make the decision of, when we look at our cows, we're out there in the pasture, and we're like, I need to do something about flies, I think that is normally dictated by, as we're driving out there in our pickup, and we have the windows down, because we like to check the flies with the window, or check our cattle with the windows down, and we can no longer do that because the cab of the pickup gets so full of flies that, hey, I need to do something about these cattle. The house fly is that fly. So really a few things I want to mention that I just think is interesting is this fly will only likely breed one time, but she will lay eggs 5 times. So she's able to, on that initial breeding, store semen and then use it to fertilize the eggs 4 more times, because she'll breed 5 or 6 times in her long, illustrious average of 20-day lifespan. I'll go over this now so I don't have to on the others. So most of these flies, this is similar from the time that they lay their eggs. They go through the larva to pupal stage, and then they are to an adult typically within 20 days. And then within 24 hours of that fly being born, it is able to breed. And then it will lay eggs every 3 to 4 days. I didn't find that anywhere, I just had to do the math. So she's going to lay eggs every 3 to 4 days. So here's the important part on this fly, and the area that we'll focus on is where they lay their eggs. So this fly, anytime we've had a dead animal out in the pasture, it's full of maggots, that's where she goes to. That's where she's laying her eggs. I'll get back on track after I make this little, I thought this was really cool. Sometimes, if you guys ever noticed when you have a dead and you have flies out there and you've got maggots, you'll sometimes also see a wasp around some deads. Have any of y'all ever noticed that? Does anybody know why those wasps are there?
Parasitic. They're parasitic.
They are parasitic, but there is, I just thought this was crazy. And I just learned this in researching this stuff. The wasp will actually, there's one form, there's not all wasps, but there is a wasp that will actually lay its eggs inside of the maggot. And then the baby wasplings will eat the maggot from the inside out to emerge. I just thought that was really interesting. Chalk one up for the wasp. So, Mother Nature, man, it's got some, there's some crazy stuff there. But this fly is typically, we're going to find her around anywhere that we have confined cattle. And she's going to lay her eggs in food waste, dead animals, spilled feed, manure of any species. So her mouth parts are basically, she's got a straw with a sponge. She lives on a liquid diet. If we see her on cattle, she's going to be around the eyes or the nostrils, and she's going to be extracting fluid. If the calf is in a dry lot situation and he's laying in manure, calf gets up The fly will land on its side so we can extract the moisture from the manure. That has very little impact on the animal because it's got a shield of dirt and manure substance, so the impact is presumed to be very low. The major impact or the major issue that could be caused or the issues that can be caused are stress. They do have the ability to land on manure, pick up eggs from parasites or worms, transport them to feed stuff. Therefore, the animals would ingest it, which could increase their parasite load. Whether they can actually transmit diseases like salmonella, I couldn't find anything really conclusive on that, but they have been known to carry it. The assumed economic impact is low. So now the stable fly, I won't go through all that. The only thing I'll point out is where they lay their eggs. The stable fly is another premise animal, and hence his name. He prefers to, or she prefers to reside around confined cattle. She does not live on a host animal like the horned fly will, and she prefers to lay her eggs in older manure, especially manure mixed with hay. So if you have them in the pasture, then it's likely because you've been feeding hay in that pasture, that hay starts to degrade. The fly will lay their eggs in that, and there is a pretty significant economic threshold here, but you're most likely going to find these within confined cattle. Dairies, these are a big problem in dairies. So the difference in them and the housefly, they're about the same size, but their mouth parts are piercing, meaning that they are feeding on blood. They about only feed on blood. They will eat some pollen or nectar, a little bit of sugar, but they primarily are going to feed on blood. Pretty significant impact on cattle. And you're typically going to find the stable fly around the legs. They like to accumulate below the knee or the hock. And the main issue is the stress associated by pain. So their bite, they're a larger fly, their bite is actually very painful. But if at high enough numbers, and Russ just walked out, but they could contribute to some significant blood loss from the animal. They're also known carriers of diseases like anaplasmosis. So on these, what the assumed economic threshold would be before it started impacting cattle performance, which affected profitability, would be 5 flies per animal. The main problem in treating or dealing with this fly is because it feeds primarily on the legs. Whenever it is not feeding, it is not on the animal. So it's going to go to tall grass or a fence post or somewhere where it can shade up under an old vehicle or a tractor. And that might make treating this fly a little more difficult. Again, I wanted this entire presentation to be based on university studies, so you can find a lot of information from manufacturers of products to kill flies, but I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go to independent, so to speak, studies. Did find one from David Bloxer, who's a extension agent out of Nebraska, and they, on one test performed at the University of Nebraska, so they observed animals losing 0.44 pounds per head per day, which is quite significant. That fly is potentially a very costly creature. So the face fly is almost identical to the house fly. The main difference in the face fly and the house fly is this fly lays her eggs almost exclusively in fresh, undisturbed manure. So you're going to find this fly more than likely in a pasture more so than a confined area. So George's pens up there, they may be full of manure, but the cattle are constantly trudging through them, and the flies, the larvae cannot hatch. They can't be exposed to sunlight, so they want to be in undisturbed manure, which is what you're going to find in the pasture. So the face fly, hence his name, you're gonna find it around the face, so it's gonna be around the eyes or the nose, and it's going to, this is one of our carriers of the bacteria that causes pink eye. So that is the most important, as far as concerning economics, that's the most important factor on this fly. So again, it's kind of hard to find some research on this, but found this out of North Carolina State. Pink eye could affect cattle prices as much as $75 per head. And finally, the horn fly, which we're all familiar with, mainly because this animal, or this fly, lives on cattle. So there's a lot of misconceptions, I believe, about the horn fly, and the main one is this animal is not a very good, I keep calling them animals. This fly is not a very good flyer. And all the research I've seen, they're actually a very good flyer, but because based on the physiology of the animal, or so she's laying eggs every 3 to 4 days, she has to have a high protein content. Protein comes from blood. She needs to constantly be feeding. This fly will feed on a calf. It resides on the calf or the cow, and it will feed up to 30 times a day. Per feeding, it's going to extract 1 to 1.5 milligrams per feeding. So the most important thing about her is she will almost exclusively also lay her eggs in fresh manure. So it means she is more likely to find her in the pasture. So this is a photo I just pulled off the internet, and I'm going to assume that that's probably a little over the allowable threshold as far as the number of flies. And so that is definitely impacting this animal both by stress and blood loss. The main thing where we are concerned about the horn fly is simply stress, and that is the stress affects the animal's overall behavior, the swishing at the tail, the slinging of saliva to try to get the flies off. They may get holed up, bunch up together. That affects grazing behavior and so forth. So there's probably some pretty significant loss there. Blood loss is secondary, but these flies are known to transmit some diseases. Dairy industry knows very well that the teat lesions caused by these flies on dairy heifers cause mastitis. The threshold on these is 200 flies per animal on a cow and 50 on a calf. It is assumed, and it was assumed in 1976, that the negative impact that it had on the cattle industry, the beef cattle industry, was somewhere between 650 million and $1 billion. Today it's probably estimated to be over $1 billion as far as how much profit that this fly alone is taking from the beef cattle industry. So there's a little study down there showing that weaning weights on untreated animals can affect those calves from 4 to 15%. So on a 500 cow ranch, that's somewhere between $8,000 and $16,000. So this is just a little chart I put together, and this is my last slide for those of you that are like, oh my God, will this please end? I put this together myself, nothing scientific about it. I just wanted to try to start to paint a picture of, based on what I know about now, about how the flies, where they lay their eggs, do they live on the animal or not, what different types or methods of control or prevention we can use, and then the prices that I got off the internet, which are typically higher than we're going to find at Ross Seed or Atwoods or the Co-op. And really, y'all don't need to pay any attention to this now because I did kind of rush through this a little bit. Just one or two things I'd like to point out. The horn fly, it is probably our biggest, our biggest issue pertaining to cost, but because the animal lives, or the fly lives on the animal, and it is primarily laying its eggs in the manure, we stand a much better chance at controlling this fly than the others. The house fly, just not an issue. The stable fly, he's a little harder to treat because it doesn't live on the animal. So premise sprays and some things like that may help us, but remember, it's just going to the legs, feeding, then leaving. The face fly, pink eye, ear tags might be a good option there. Of course, if you use the ear tags, the fly tags, use 2 tags. Be sure that you take them out in the fall, or it'll have on there, it'll say the date of effectiveness, because if you leave those in, the animal will build up, or the fly will build up a resistance to smaller amounts of the chemical, and they just don't become effective. One good program real quick, put 2 ear tags in your fly, so your fall coverage, you're gonna be getting your cows up anyway to wean. So get those cows up and put 2 fly tags in them. At that time, you need to worm them anyway, so use a Ivomec or something like that. You'll get 28 days control on the wormer, on flies as well. That's a good program to start out with. IGRs, your Alticid, your feed-through products, those are highly effective on the face fly and the horn fly, just due to where they're laying all of their eggs in the manure. They're fed at the right amount and so forth. So, just to finish up, you did everything here for 6 months. That comes to just under $30 per head. So, which was really where I was trying to go with this thing, but I just could not find enough. I just could not find enough information. So we could spend potentially $30 per head in treating and preventing flies. Is that $30 retained to you as a producer? I don't know. So I would love to have that answer, because I would love to know how much money can we spend to prevent flies to where it's going to be returned. So with that being said, I'm done. Y'all are free. Sorry to bore you guys.
I do appreciate your again.